In this video, I'm going to tell you the 2 steps you can take to solidify your ideal client niche. I've been doing this for a long, long time, and what I've learned is that people that don't have a clearly defined niche don't have focus, and if you don't have focus, you don't have results. So do these 2 things so that you can be more successful as a coach. 2 steps to your, that's 4, to your ideal client, to your niche. And I think it's critical to distinguish between niche in general and ideal client for this particular conversation. I think there can be different niches. Like you can have a topic niche. You can have a niche that is a profile niche, which is your ideal client. And you can have a personality niche. Also, we're not going to go into all those things, but what we're talking about here is a personal profile niche. That is the person that you're wanting to serve. And so it's probably easier to think about that person as your ideal client. And that's one of the ways that a lot of people are, or that's one of the things that a lot of people are focused on is who is my ideal client. And you know what, it might actually be better. I don't think we've ever done this, is who's your ideal student?
Ooh, I like it.
Okay. Right. So why did you immediately respond to that?
Because it makes me excited about teaching.
Right.
Yeah. It taps me into that. Like, ooh, like who's hungry to learn?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How do we never think about that before? Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's perfect. And actually, before we go any further, what do you think about this background? We had a discussion on whether or not this background was good. Not sure about the energy or what have you, but let us know what you think about my background, this particular background. So if we think about ideal student, then right, as you said, it immediately plugs us into learning. And the ideal student needs a teacher and they need lessons from that teacher. And the more that we've been talking about this over the last several months, I would say we've gotten a lot more clarity around the fact that people are searching for lessons. They're not necessarily searching for people until they become connected to a single person. So, you know, we have a lot of people in our community that know us personally, and a lot of times people will watch the videos just because it's on our channel or it's on our Facebook page or something, but that's only because they've watched a lot of them. And what is really critical to understand here is that before somebody knows you, they're looking for a lesson. And the reason I think that's really critical is that most of us are afraid of us being seen. You know, somebody just mentioned earlier today when we were doing a workshop, am I good enough, for some version of, am I good enough to teach?
Yeah.
And we have these ego-driven questions based on us as an identity and as a person, when in reality, nobody's looking for us anyway. And if they are looking for us, they're already sold on us, right? Like that's the only time I think that most people would be looking for the person. What they're looking for are the lessons. And what we've seen, I know with several of our clients individually and people that we coach together, when we detach from the lessons that we learn and we recognize, oh, those people are learning the lesson, are looking for the lessons. Oh yeah, totally. I can absolutely teach these lessons. There's a shift because now we're not putting our identity on the line. We're just assessing whether we have knowledge that somebody else is looking for. And I don't know that I've ever heard anybody actually say they're afraid of not being able to answer questions that are in their domain, obviously, right? Like a lot of coaches are afraid that they're not going to be able to answer all the questions that a client might ask, but that's a little bit of a different context. But when we're talking about whatever domain you have, you know, whatever area of familiarity or area of expertise you have, I don't know of anybody that's ever said, I'm afraid of answering questions about subjects I know about. They're afraid of themselves. They're afraid of not being able to lead, or they're afraid of not being able to speak in public or something like that. But it's all personal performance. And it's because our ego is involved. So this ideal client conversation might actually be off base just by the fact that we are in the conversation wrong, in air quotes. We're in the conversation as ourselves rather than focusing on what is this ideal student actually looking to learn? And then people can come alive, especially people that resonate with the idea of being a teacher, which is what you
Right.
said earlier.
Yeah, it's the performance piece, right? Like where I feel like I have to practice something to be good at something, to deliver something, versus when I learn something, right? When I know something and I'm excited about something that I've learned, I'm actually excited to share it. Like I want somebody to ask me the question, right? Because then I'm geeked out about sharing with them what it is that I learned and what it is that I know to be true based on the experiences that I have. So there's none of the same resistance that shows up inside of performance, and none of the same fear, right?
Right.
Because I know it.
Yeah. The fear is generally attached to us messing up the
Yeah,
performance, like you said.
right.
One of the very first seminars I did, it was in a restaurant. I had
Mhm.
kind of like hijacked a restaurant and asked them if I could bring some people and teach them some stuff. And they didn't have a back room or anything. So we had about 50 or 60 people in a crowded restaurant. And there was no partitions or anything. It was like, these are the people that I'm talking to. And I don't know who these people are, like right next to me. They're just eating. But I had something to teach, and people had something that they wanted to learn. And so there were about 60 of us in this restaurant, I think. And it was the first time that I really broke down this concept, like a version of this concept that then turned into who is your seeker.
Mhm.
And there was a woman in the seminar. I think it just sounds better that it was a seminar. The fact that it was a restaurant, like whatever, a restaurant minar. So
Perfect.
there was a woman in the restaurant minar, and she said that she feels insecure about being a speaker
Yeah.
and about being a coach and about being a leader and all this sort of stuff. And so I brought her up to the front of the room and I asked who her seeker was. And she said that actually, before I asked why she has these fears. And I don't remember now what the exact words were, but some version of, I don't want to mess up, just like you said. I don't want to mess up. And I don't like people looking at me and so forth. So I asked who her seeker was, and she said it was teachers, school teachers. So she was a former classroom teacher. And she said she wants to help classroom teachers specifically with like control in the classroom, discipline in the classroom, making classroom go well, and teaching the students what they need to learn, all that sort of stuff. So I asked if there were any teachers in the class in the restaurant minar, and there were 3 of them. And so I said, do any of you have any questions for her? And one woman said something like, what do you do when a student is acting out? And what happened next, I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't like thinking about this. I mean, it was the first time I'd even taught this stuff. So it's not like I had any expectations based on teaching it in the past.
Right.
And when this woman in the audience asked the question, the woman that was up front that was afraid of speaking, she literally took like a half a step forward, and just like she was in this kind of slumped over stance, kind of a mousy sort of I'm not good enough body language.
Mm.
And then she just stepped forward. I didn't ask her to do this. Her body just did it. And
Wow.
she just kind of stepped forward toward the woman in the audience, which was like at about a 45-degree angle from where we were up in front. And she just stepped toward her and just adopted this powerful
Mm.
stance. Her feet were like shoulder width apart. I mean, we teach this in speaking, like this power stance. And she just said, well, what I've learned is that when a student is acting out, there's usually something underneath it. And so we need to be compassionate as teachers, and you got to ask this and this and this. And she just gave this answer that was like 90 seconds of fire. I mean, it was incredible. And I was just blown away because she literally in that moment transformed. And then
Mm.
what was also equally powerful is that as soon as she was done giving the answer, she stepped back into her schlumpy body language.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I said something about it at the time, but that was the first moment that I actually witnessed what happens when we step into asking questions from our seeker. And she just completely shifted out of her performance fear, which was over here while she was all schlumped over, into just teacher. I got this. I know the answer to this question because it's based on my experience. It was
Mm.
so incredibly powerful. And what most coaches are trying to do, in my opinion, is stay in some zone of insecurity for themselves and then just try to overcome it, overcompensate, or hide it or something, instead of actually finding that zone where they can become that solid teacher and the solid question answerer. And we all have that, but most of us just won't become that while we're messing around, like following all these other game plans or the one size fits all, or we're just not rooted in and connected to who we truly are and what questions do we feel really good about answering. So I know this, we're going to get into these two steps. This is just foundational context here. We're going to give you two really important questions to ask yourself. But right now, I'd love to know if something just came up for you. If you're listening or watching, I'd love to know, were there questions that just immediately came up for you, or topics that just immediately came up for you? Like, if somebody were to ask me this, I would absolutely answer powerfully, right? And that'll lead into these questions. But is there anything you want to say about that before we get to these questions?
It's so good. It's so, the commitment to being in insecurity versus dropping into our power and what it is that we know is fascinating to me. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because, so two things immediately come up to me. I think a lot of us have a belief that we're just not meant for success, or that we deserve punishment, or we will always struggle, or insecurity and instability is just who we are. Like, we're attached to that for some reason. I think another potential reason is we think that if we can overcome that, then it's a bigger win than if we just do the thing that we're powerful doing. Like, almost like it's just too easy. Because I believe that we feel our problems are so complicated that our solutions must also be complicated.
Yeah.
And the truth that I've experienced, I know you've experienced, is that the more complicated our problems feel and seem and look, the more simple the solution really is. So I believe that we generally either miss or dismiss simple solutions because our mind is made up that the solution should be as complicated as the problem is. You got a different idea of why you think it is?
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think there's a programming for suffering. I also believe that we don't, that we've been taught that the things that we're really passionate about aren't good enough to be able to succeed. That thing that we really want, that we're really excited about, that we can't make it like that. There has to be some sort of efforting or struggle or like work around it. I think that we dismiss the things that we really are good at. And a lot of us in this industry, I think, are surrounded by other people in this industry. And so who we're watching and who we're paying attention to and who we're listening to are other people who are doing similar work. And it's very easy for us to remember that while the shifts that we've had and experienced might not be new to you, Sean, as a coach as well, to somebody who's not in this work, it's completely game changing and transformational as it was to us before we actually learned it.
It's easy for us to forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you might have said remember, but
oh, okay. Then yes, forget.
I mean, just however you position it, like, we got to remember that. And it's easy for us to forget that.
Yeah.
For sure. And a lot of people, it's not okay to even have those passions and desires. Some people, it's not okay to be good at something, because if you're good at something, then the people around you might throw rocks, they might try to sabotage because they're uncomfortable with your success, your growth. So there's a lot of reasons I think that people will stay stuck and committed to that circle of insecurity, when hopefully there's hope in this statement, but there's also sadness for me, and I know for you, is that just outside that circle of insecurity is a place that you belong, like a place. And I don't mean, although I did mean when I said that, you belong, like you should be there. But as I heard myself say it, it's like, that's not what you mean. Explain that. But then I thought, no, maybe that is like, you belong there. because we have this desire to belong. And
Yeah.
so in the circle of insecurity, it doesn't feel like we belong in the sense that like this doesn't just feel really good, right? It doesn't feel aligned. It doesn't feel like it brings the best out of us. There's struggle in here. So the idea of belonging from an alignment standpoint, there is a circle where we do belong.
Right.
We are the essence of that. And it's because of all the things that we've picked up along the way that will inform the lessons that we can teach other people. So hopefully one of the big takeaways I want you guys to have out of this is the separation between the teacher and the lessons. First of all, the separation from ideal client to ideal student. And then the student needs a teacher, but the teacher teaches lessons. So what that ideal student is looking for is the lesson or the lessons that they want in their life. And you have some. Every single one of you that are watching this video or listening in any capacity have lessons that are valuable to somebody. But a lot of people just decide, yeah, but I want to teach to that particular kind of student.
Right.
So I need to figure out what will be valuable to that person rather than go, I have lessons that are valuable to somebody, and it might not be that person, and it probably won't be those people that are immediately around you, but somebody out there is looking for the lessons that I've picked up along the way. That's the easiest in terms of energetic. That's the easiest way to show up as a powerful teacher, in my experience, is teach the stuff that you know and get lit up by it. So here are the 2 steps, 2 questions. The first question is, what was the biggest shift or breakthrough or transformational experience that you've had in your life? What was the biggest one? What was your biggest one?
Releasing guilt and shame and dropping the self-punishment, like really getting rid of everything that wasn't love for me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
My biggest shift, thank you for asking, was
Hey, what was your biggest shift, Sean?
Aw.
I care. I want to know.
Feel so loved. My biggest shift is the piano bench moment. It's become somewhat of a signature story that, I haven't told for a long time. I mean, I think you recognize it. It's been years since I have told it with intention and told it with somewhat consistency. I think to some degree, I don't know, maybe I got tired of it or something, or I just didn't see the value of it. But my piano bench moment, which was literally piano bench, when a coach helped me drop my biggest issue of I'm not good enough.
Right.
And as soon as that changed, then I got up off that bench and I just felt like a different person. And then I wanted to teach that. I wanted to help people get rid of their beliefs. So that's your moment, your biggest moment. That's my biggest moment. And then the second question is, and feel free to share this with us. We love hearing about this stuff. And I think it would be great for you to just hear yourself wherever you are, in your journey, to hear yourself identify like, oh, that's the moment, right?
Right.
And there's a reason that I ask the biggest breakthrough moment, because there's juice there, right? There's passion there somewhere. If it qualifies as the biggest moment, then there's significance there for you. And then the second question is, if you've now identified that moment, the second question is, who were you right before that?
Who were you right before your piano bench moment?
Aw, that was almost creepy. That was almost like that you were totally ready. Did I actually finish the sentence or the question? I don't think so. Yeah, you were just ready. That was pretty funny. I was genuinely shocked by that. Genuinely, like you caused me to wobble a little bit. So who was I? I was I was a person that had a lot of confidence in his skills,
Mm,
but very little self-esteem.
yeah.
So my value as a person was really suffering because I wasn't able to create the money that I was wanting to create at the time and have the success in the business that I was working at the time. And I was frustrated. I was, um, I was irritated. I was in a place of shame because so many people were telling me that I should be, further than I was, basically.
Yeah.
And they were telling me that as a way to kind of pump me up. But the effect that it had on me is all these people see greatness in me and I'm not producing it. Therefore, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Um, I was still working hard. So I was showing up, whether it was reading books or going to seminars and continuing to try to do whatever it is that I thought I needed to do in the moment. So I was still working. And I would say I was somewhat aimless, even though I had these focus points. I was doing this and doing this and doing that. I didn't feel a sense of overall purpose. Like I didn't
Mm,
really get a sense that I was going somewhere big, like bigger than me. Even though I knew I was supposed to have a purpose,
mm.
I didn't have that sense.
Wow.
So once you know the moment, then you can just ask yourself, who were you? I was just gonna try to make it the whole way
You would
without
be
asking
better if
about
you could.
you.
Absolutely. Just keep
Yeah.
going. Yeah,
Yeah. So then you want to ask yourself, I'm not talking to you, Michelle.
of
You want
course.
to ask yourself, who were you then?
Mhm.
And it'll take a little bit of exploration.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's hard to answer those questions because we're not them. We're not that person anymore. Even if it was just like last week or a couple weeks ago, even if it wasn't a long time ago, if we've made a big shift, that means fundamentally
Yeah.
we're seemingly different. I mean, we might be seeing the world different. We have a different experience of ourselves. So it's hard to then put the old lenses back on that we took off. But it's important for the sake of this process. Um, so that's it. That's the video. Michelle, who were you before your moment of releasing the guilt and shame?
Yeah, that's funny. Thank you for asking. You really know how to make me feel important. um, I was suffering in silence. Um, I was I was under a lot of self-induced pressure. So I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to perform in believing that that would bring about my self-worth. I had a lot of shame. I had a lot of guilt. I believed that I deserved to suffer and that I was unworthy of acceptance. I was unworthy of love. I definitely felt unlovable. Um, and I was actually doing a lot of work and decently successful, right? I had coaching clients. I had like I was in this work and in this business, and the motivation for the work that I was doing was coming from what I would label as a dirty place, because it was coming from a place of seeking like the approval and the validation and the love that I didn't have. I was trying to earn it through getting that external validation from other people. I was angry because none of it was working, and I was under all this pressure all the time because it was coming from me. I felt like I was doing all the right things, and like one of the questions I asked Sean was like, I'm doing everything right. Like, how come nothing is working? Right. Like, why can't I get a break? Was a big thing for me.
Awesome. So what were
Yeah, it
you?
was awesome. Good times.
I just suppressed what I wanted to say. What I wanted to say, but I didn't say, and I won't say, is, you must have been really fun to be around.
You tell me. I was until I wasn't. I could fake it pretty good.
And there's some deep, like profound seriousness around that question. Like, who are we? Like, do we like being around ourselves?
Sure.
And the answer to that a lot of times is obviously no, if
No.
we're struggling and all this stuff that so many of us are wrestling with.
Yeah.
So with all of that in mind, what were you searching for? And I mean, like actually searching for from the perspective of who you were then, not like looking back, oh, this young girl was searching for, love or connection or whatever. What were you actually typing in Google, and what were you buying if you were buying books or attending seminars or teachings or what have you? What were you literally searching for, if you can remember?
Yeah. How to be successful. Like I wanted to be successful in my business. That's what I was searching for. I mean, that's what I was looking for at that time. I wasn't clear that I was actually the problem. So I wasn't looking for anything that had anything to do with me specifically. Mm-hmm.
And I would say I was searching for something similar, just how to be successful. And the reason it's critical to know what people are searching for is because if we try to teach them what they're not searching for, it's going to be hard for them to find it.
Aye, aye, aye.
And so what I did is, because I had this massive shift around limiting beliefs, about my limiting belief, I was like, hey, everybody, you got to get rid of your limiting beliefs. But I wasn't actually searching for how to get rid of my limiting beliefs. I tried to teach that for a while, and it just, like, it was great when people listened, but people weren't already looking for it. So that's what's important for us to understand, is that when we look back and we ask ourselves, what was it that got us through that shift? It's
Right.
probably not the same as what we were looking for before the shift.
I was going to say 100%. Yeah. Cause we have a different perspective over here. Looking back, I can say, oh my gosh, I was looking for approval and acceptance and love, but I didn't know that at the time. Yeah. It's huge.
Right. And that's where the messaging fits in. That, like, when we look at what is it that we want to actually talk about, and how do we want to language the things that we language, especially from a title standpoint, right? You can talk about whatever it is you want to talk about inside of a video, let's say, but the title of the video is going to be more important for what people are searching for, because if the title doesn't appeal to them, then they won't watch the video. And then what comes out in minute whatever we're in, 25 right now, will never be heard, because they didn't open the door to the video, because the title didn't match what it is that they were looking for. So that's what's really important. And something that a lot of people struggle with is they think that the message, like the content, needs to match the title. And there has to be alignment for sure, but there doesn't have to be an exact match. So you can teach self-love without calling it self-love. I learned how to teach limiting beliefs in my classroom, but put a different sign on the door for what people were actually looking for.
Right.
And that's a little bit beyond the scope of this particular video. So we're not going to, actually teach that in depth, but I just wanted to put that in there because it's in this conversation, and it's one of the things that a lot of people really wrestle with. It's the, yeah, but how do I do this? And yeah, but what about that? So I just want to make that distinction, that your title doesn't necessarily need to match the content inside word for word. So what we want to do is, well, just to like recap, like, there's your niche, there's your ideal client.
Right.
I think the best place to start for most coaches is to teach an earlier version of yourself. The reason that's so powerful and important, I'm hearing a bell. Do you hear a bell? Like, I think somebody just outside my office must have really liked that. I was just kidding. I'm gonna pretend that they were clapping because they heard that concept through the door. So the best place to start is an earlier version of yourself.
Yes.
And the reason for most people that's the best place to start is because so many of the other boxes are checked. Meaning, do you know what that person that is searching for your lessons is thinking? Yeah, because you were that person. So you know what they were thinking. Do you know where they are online and what they're doing? Yeah, because you were doing that, and that's where you were online. Do you have stories that would match what they're experiencing? Yes, because your stories are going to resonate with somebody that is just earlier on the same path that you've been traveling. Now, that doesn't always mean that that's where you'll stay, but yeah. I believe that's where you start. for most people. And I can't tell you how many times, whether it's a coaching client or just people I'm talking to, somewhat casually in this industry, will try all these other things and then eventually land there anyway. So if you've been challenged, you've been struggling with who your ideal client is, teach the lessons that you've learned to an earlier version of yourself. And there are just so many things that are going to be aligned there. And when you teach the lessons that you've learned to an earlier version of yourself, some other people that don't necessarily even match that version of you are going to show up. That's just the nature of when you get lit up and you're passionate about things, you get in motion, you create a magnet. Like, people will show up that don't match the exact profile. But you think about this, how many times have you said, I know I've thought this so many times, and we've heard people go, man, what I wish I would have known back then.
Oh yeah.
Like, if I could go back and talk to my 18-year-old self, if I could go back and talk to my 30-year-old self, if I could go back and talk to an earlier version of me, there's actually like some nostalgia sort of attached to that. Like, there's an excitement, like, oh, I would go back there and, put my hands on their cheeks and tell them this, whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
So we actually have a natural thought pattern of going back and teaching ourselves lessons that we just didn't have back then. And this is like about as close to that as we can do, is find somebody else that's in that same position and teach those things to them. So the passion that comes from helping people that are an earlier version of you is really powerful. It'll bring a lot out of us in a very good way. It's that woman stepping forward and going, this is what I've learned in my classroom that will help you. And that kind of solidness and certainty is what a lot of people are lacking in their teaching, but it's what people are looking for in whatever lessons they're looking for. So you want to just be thinking about the mind of that ideal client being yourself. What were you thinking about? What were you feeling? Michelle said she was angry and she was putting all this self-induced pressure on herself. What were you praying about? What were you crying, going to sleep at night about if you were doing that? What did you wake up thinking about? What did you try that worked? What did you try that didn't work? What literally were you typing in to Google or, search engine, just metaphorically? What were you literally searching for? What were you afraid of? What were you worried about? If you can go back and put those lenses back on just before your biggest breakthrough, that is the ideal client that I suggest you start with.
You said certainty a moment ago, and that's the word I was thinking about. There's certainty there, like a pure certainty, because you were them, and you're not now. So like, that, like you lived it. It was actually your experience. And there's can you get more certain than that?
Certainty, the way we use it, is what you know in your body.
Yeah, that's it.
You literally know that in your body because you were there.
Yeah.
So that is tapping into a level of certainty that a lot of coaches just don't have.
There's certainty in the possibility because you're not there anymore. Like you're certain about that person, you're certain about the path, and you're certain about the processes that got you here, and you're certain about the person and the place that you are in now. There's the through line is of certainty. Like, it, like I can take you from here to, or from there to here, because I walked from there to here.
Right. So you're certain in the possibility of that change because you lived that change.
Yes.
Which is similar to what I was going to say, that a lot of people, before you interrupted me, a lot of people are just drawn to new. We're drawn to the things that either we're learning or we're just excited about because it's new. Yeah. But there's no certainty in new. So when we are trying to teach people to go someplace that we haven't been, or we haven't been for a long period of time, or for whatever reason, we're just not certain there, then that lack of certainty will show up most of the time. And where it will generally show up is in our sabotage. That's where it'll show up, because we will convince ourselves that we're not ready to do it. We don't have the right information. We can't answer the questions. Who are we to teach that stuff? That's where the lack of certainty will generally show up. So if you are wrestling with that inner dialogue about whether you should do this or what's the right thing to do and what will they think and all that, and it's causing you to not take action, I can virtually guarantee you there's a lack of certainty that's producing those questions that then the mind starts to wrestle with. And we don't usually like the answers to those questions because the net effect of those questions is usually you shouldn't be doing this. We don't know if it's going to work. What if they find out? What if you get exposed as a fraud? Like that's usually what those questions will do, is they'll shut us down. And that's confirmation generally that there's some level of uncertainty in your body about this thing. So just maybe one or two more things about this conversation, that when you have your ideal client identified, you don't necessarily need to teach that person where they are in that moment. The best way to think about this, in my opinion, is education. So if you remember when you were a kindergartner, that's the moment, you know, before the piano bench or before you dropped the guilt and shame, before you got into this journey, you were a kindergartner. And you might identify that people are in kindergarten in this place. They're just at an elementary level or an introduction to this whole journey. And you can tell them what they need to get to the next step and then what the next step is after that and so forth. But maybe you've done this work for a long period of time and you have just developed a body for college kids, you know, or high school students, right? Like you just are more lit up by people that are further on the path. So you don't necessarily need to teach that person there, but you might teach an evolution of that person.
Right.
But you might teach them, like you might meet them somewhere else. And so you gave a good example of like maybe the person that is in kindergarten just before that, maybe you have a free download for them.
Right.
And these are the ways to reduce the self-induced pressure. And maybe that's something that you would have downloaded back then. And then you might have a customer journey. Now this is when somebody's business has evolved a little bit. But I just want to paint this picture because some people will go, yeah, but I don't want to teach that person because I don't want to mess with that mind that I used to be. Right. And a lot of people are frustrated by that. And that's totally fine. You might have an invitation for that person. And then you might have like an online course or some sort of product for them on their next step. And then you might have maybe a mastermind or a group program or something for their next step. And then you might only privately coach people that are at a certain step, but they're still in that same through line where you can meet them where they are and invite them in. So it's like they open the door here, they come into the hallway here, they step into the living room here, and then the back room after they've gone all this way is where you personally might spend your time with them.
Right.
And I've had a bunch of clients that have had a huge realization with that thought there, that I don't actually need to, for whatever reason, spend my time or get irritated by that beginner's mind.
Right.
Because there's irritation there, or there's judgment there, or it doesn't even have to be anything negative. That doesn't mean we're a bad person if we don't want to spend our one-on-one time with certain people. But what I would say is if you're relatively new in coaching, you can't invite them all the way through and just do one-on-one coaching unless you understand them through this process.
Yeah.
So if this is appealing to you, but you're a brand new coach and you haven't coached them one-on-one in their kindergarten state, then my advice to you is coach those people.
Yes.
And you don't have to coach them for a huge amount of time, but coach them so that you know what the download should be, so that you know what the next product should be, so that you know what the next group program should be. And then you can know their one-on-one coaching desires. So you really, truly have to know them through this process for there to be certainty throughout the whole, you know, that whole path.
Yeah. And you have to keep going along your process so that you can continue to be those steps ahead and be able, right? Because if I'm still in middle school, I can't teach college level either.
Exactly. So it's always an evolutionary process. And then a couple quick questions that came up as we were talking about this is, if you don't feel like you've had a biggest shift, if you can't look back and go, oh, my life totally changed from that one moment, then don't put the pressure. This would be my suggestion. You can answer however you want. Don't put the pressure on biggest.
Yeah.
Like that could make us feel like it's got to be earth shattering. It's got to be super profound. Then just choose a big shift that you had, something that, you recognized, you made a big change in, and maybe you found yourself telling other people about that. So there could be already a natural propensity for you to teach that content. Is there anything you would add to the question of what if I don't have a biggest shift?
Yeah. Think about the lessons that you've learned. Right. So what do you know that you didn't used to know? And take, as you said, the pressure off of like, what was the biggest, most transformational experience I've had? Remove that pressure and just jot down what are some of the lessons that you've learned.
Perfect. And then if you feel like you have a bunch of them, 2 or more biggest shifts, like it seems like you've got a bunch of peaks in your mountain climbing in your past, then just pick one. I mean,
Yep.
honestly, just pick one. Don't spend a whole lot of time and energy trying to pick the right one. If something isn't intuitive to you, like that's the biggest shift, I've got 3 things that might fit into biggest, then just pick one. Especially the earlier you are in your journey, you got to realize that what you choose is actually not important for a lot of the lessons you need to learn anyway.
Yeah.
Meaning that you need to learn how to teach, or you might need to learn how to invite people into a coaching program. You might need to learn about business, and you might need to heal your relationship with money or success. There are a lot of things in this journey that actually are not dependent on the content that you teach. So I would rather you get in motion in any of them, even if it's quote unquote wrong. If you find out later that that's not the one that you would really prefer, that's great. Learn all those other lessons while you're still in motion with one of those peaks.
That's what I did when you asked me here on this video, because I've had multiple like soul shifting experiences. And so I just opened my mouth and was as surprised at which one came out as anybody listening was.
Nice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so often the answer is just pick one.
Yeah.
I mean, it really truly is. It sounds so demeaning sometimes,
Yeah.
but a lot of the lessons that we need can only be learned in motion, and we need a target to get in motion. And so a lot of times the purpose of finding or identifying a target in the grand scheme of things, the purpose of it is just to learn the lessons in your pursuit of it or in your movement toward it. I don't know how many I can look back and go, oh, what I was doing in 2007, I can look back now and go, oh, that was the purpose. Back then, I thought the purpose was to build a business or make a bunch of money or whatever. And I can look back now and realize the big lesson that I got out of that little journey was this. And it wasn't the thing that I probably thought it was. And then once I learned that lesson, then it was time to pivot with, another, whether it was another seeker or another journey within the evolution of that one single seeker or whatever it is. So you just got to stay in motion. Like that's the answer for just about all this stuff is stay in motion. So hopefully this has been valuable. If you have any questions specifically about this topic, this video, you can certainly type them in the comments. And we offer one-on-one support, free consultation. So if any of you want one-on-one customized support where you can get on the phone with one of our coaches and just ask them direct questions, and they can ask questions back, and you can kind of co-create the creativity or the identity or the identification of what it is that's stopping you, or what it is that you really want, or what's going to pull the passion out of you. Then there's a link in the description. You can go to coachshansmith.com/book my call and get on our calendar for free. And it could be a way for you to just experience some coaching that might shift something in your life, or might alter the path or give you more certainty that you might be looking for. Now, there's a lot to this conversation. We can take this very deep and detailed. And we do have a training on how to identify your seeker at a very detailed level that I know was a game changer for you, was a game changer for me. And so if any of you want to go through that training, then we'll put a card up here and or a link in the description so that you can go through. I mean, it's a full on deep dive training that's pulled out of one of our marketing courses
Yep.
that people pay for. So if you want to go further with this and help you even get more and more clarity and specificity and certainty, then check out that training. And we do videos on this channel all the time. If you're this far into the video, you already have a sense of like how we do here. And make sure you're subscribed and click the notifications if you want to see all the videos that we have. And make sure you tell me about this background, whether you liked it or not. I feel like you did pretty good, Michelle. You performed pretty well in this video. So maybe this background is good for you.
I like it.
How did I do?
I think you did excellent.
It must be the background.
I'm sure.
Now, if you like this video, check out that video about the #1 mistake most coaches make in business. And in that video, I had a massive realization that I think you'll benefit from. So instead of seeing them as my target, I saw me as their target. I saw me as the one they were searching for.